The year 2024 is a very significant and monumental year for ministry in the Southern Union for a few reasons. Number one, we've come off one of the most successful evangelistic and missional years here in our Southern Union ministry. More than 12,000 people plus have been baptized in the gospel of Jesus Christ. In addition, our church has grown on every conceivable metric level. The conference has expanded. And I'm just delighted in the year 2024, this marks another very significant event. And that is the celebration or the acknowledgement of 10 years that we've been in our new Southern Union headquarters. I remember we began talking, probably the very first executive committee on the heels of my election as president in the year 2011. We began talking about a transition of our headquarters from Decatur, Georgia, on Memorial Drive, to Peachtree Corners, where we are now. And we used to call it Norcross, but it's Peachtree Corners now. And we had conversations, we looked at little plans and models, and we all agreed that we should move in a new direction. The committee had a battery of questions surrounding how this will impact ministry, and we were very optimistic, conjointly, collectively, the officers as well as the committee members. We were very, very joined at the hip in terms of our quest to grow and move in a direction that will enhance the marketability as well as the ministry of the Southern Union. And I recall that there are a battery of deficits that we experienced in our old headquarters. We didn't have enough room for our employees to work adequately. We didn't have enough filing space to put our materials and to neatly and professionally archive and file. We just didn't have enough room to get our work done in our workspaces. It was a challenge for the limited space. We outgrew our former building, and there are a lot of things we wanted to do. My mind goes back to a multi-purpose room, and it just accomplished everything. In there, we had our Southern Union Revolving Fund committees. We had our executive committees. We had a battery of media. Everything was in that one space. When it was time to eat, we had to move chairs around. When there was a special event, when there was a party, we had to move everything around just to change that one space into a workable, multi-purpose space for us to enjoy our life as employees and our ministry of executing our charge through the Southern Union headquarters.
When the Southern Union chose to move its headquarters location, it was only after 50 years of being in the same location in Decatur, Georgia. And at that time, 50 years prior, our membership was a lot smaller than it was obviously 50 years later. In fact, when they moved into the new office at the time on Memorial Drive, our membership of the Southern Union was only about 47,000 members. Well, 50 years later, that membership stood at nearly 280,000 members. And I know when I joined the Southern Union, our president, Dr. Smith, he was understanding the limitations that we were experiencing there in the old building, just a number of different things. One of those things that we were limited on was simply IT. Technology had drastically changed in those 50 years. When the original building was built on Memorial Drive, there was no such thing as computers. There was no such thing as the internet, etc. Wireless was unheard of. And so our IT department had done the best that it could in trying to retrofit that building. But again, there were still so many limitations.
Well, we had a great building manager, building committee manager, in the person of our chief financial officer at the time, who was Elder Randy Robinson. And obviously he had his hand on the plow, and he just made up his mind he wasn't going to give up until the goal was reached. Yes, we had a lot to do. HVAC considerations, we had issues surrounding electricity, everything was gutted, and we had to start from scratch. Probably the greatest obstacle that comes to mind for me was simply just fulfilling all the requirements for a certificate of occupancy, dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure that everything was up to snuff in terms of our electrical system, our industrial kitchen, and some of the other infrastructural type things. But the certificate of occupancy was somewhat delayed, probably because of some of the bureaucratic machinery within our jurisdiction here. And I recall Elder Randy Robinson and we were so anxious to get this cared for before our executive committee, which was days away when we were planning our grand opening. And he and I were just waiting for God to do something special. And he did. We prayed and we asked the Lord, and in the nick of time, we were able to get our certificate of occupancy. When we think in terms of the fact that the building probably cost us maybe $15 to $16 million to complete, on hand we had $8 million in our unexpended plant fund. And we had a lot of work to do in terms of getting into our new headquarters without debt. So we, by the grace of God, were very successful in putting together portfolios and raising the resources needed, shy of maybe $3 or $4 million. And that balance we sought to borrow from ourselves, to borrow from the Southern Union Revolving Fund. But we were very anxious to pay that off with interest, and we did by God's grace, but it was only accomplished by loyal, committed employees of the Southern Union. We shook hands on the fact that we would live within our budgets. We would not be extravagant in our spending. We would be very conservative in how we move our ministries forward for that particular year. And the Lord blessed us in that year to come up with the balance of the resources required to burn the mortgage. Here, we have a beautiful, beautiful cafeteria, which is really a dining room with screens that come from the ceiling, which are very multi-purpose in nature. There could be parties there and retirement celebrative moments there. There's a commercial kitchen, which we did not have before, which becomes very significant when we're feeding numbers of people.
I was in charge of preparing meals for the President's Council meetings and quarterly birthday celebrations. It was a challenge to go out and purchase all the food and other items needed for the meals and then bring everything back to the Decatur office with hardly any space to store everything before preparing the meals. In the new building, we have an industrial-sized kitchen with an industrial-sized stove, refrigerator, and freezer. So, no more challenges with food preparations.
One of the things that our new building has afforded us the ability to do, in addition to all of the new technology and the advances there in that area, but it was also that it's given us a whole lot more space and room. Now, we have a committee room that's large enough to accommodate our executive committee. Obviously, because our executive committee is based on the membership of our union, that committee has grown exponentially as well. In our old building, it had gotten to the point where we really couldn't adequately accommodate our executive committee when we met. And of course, all through the year, there are multiple boards and committees that meet, and we now have space where we can do that. We have dedicated committee rooms, we have a worship area, we have an auditorium where we can meet for different devotionals and worships and whatever the need may be. And so God has richly blessed as we have made this transition, as we made this move in 2014.
Now, in contrast to what we had then, the proof is in the pudding. We see it on every conceivable metric that measures success for the Southern Union, on every level of money, of souls, of growth, of baptisms. We just see it all evidenced by God's grace and God's power and having moved into this wonderful headquarters. What I'm really hoping for as we go forward in this building, obviously we've done some wonderful conversation identifying some hallmarks of the past, but as I look forward, my prayer sincerely is we will never lose sight of the most important and the most meaningful work that God has summoned us to. Yes, we do a lot of conventions, we do a lot of orientations, we do a lot of trainings, we do a lot of special interest groups. We have great programming, wonderful fellowship as employees. My prayer is we never will lose sight of the most important dimension of why we exist, and that is to introduce men and women to Jesus Christ.